The first satellite war may begin with a lie from a clock. A carrier strike group is moving through contested waters at night. The sea is dark, the air is crowded, and every screen in the command center glows with the nervous confidence of modern war. Aircraft are stacked in holding patterns. Drones are feeding imagery back to analysts. Destroyers are sharing tracks across secure links. Logistics officers are watching fuel, weapons, and spare parts move across a 1,000-mile chain. Then the timing starts to drift. At first, it looks like a glitch. One system is off by a fraction, then another. Then a drone feed stutters. A targeting update arrives late. A navigation solution gives two answers. A ship reports its position with confidence, but the position does not match the rest of the picture. Somewhere in the network, the clocks are still ticking. They are simply ticking wrong. No satellite has exploded. No missile has streaked upward through the atmosphere. No dramatic fireball has bloomed over the horizon like a warning from a less subtle century. Yet the force is already being touched. The first symptom of anti-satellite warfare may not be destruction, it may be doubt. Doubt in the map, doubt in the feed, doubt in the timestamp, doubt in the commander's ability to know where his own forces are, where the enemy is, and which signal still deserves trust. That is the part people miss. When most people hear anti-satellite weapon, they picture a missile blasting into space and smashing a spacecraft into glittering debris. That image matters. It has happened before. It may happen again. A direct ascent anti-satellite missile is the most cinematic version of the problem, and governments do enjoy a bit of theater when they want the world to notice. Strategic signaling has always had a weakness for pyrotechnics, but the larger arsenal is quieter. A satellite can be jammed. It can be spoofed. It can be dazzled by a laser. It can be stalked by another spacecraft. It can be hacked through a ground station. Its command link can be targeted. Its data can be corrupted. Its operator can be deceived. Its service can be degraded slowly enough that lawyers and diplomats spend 3 days arguing over whether an attack has occurred while soldiers are already dealing with the consequences. That is the central fact of modern counterspace warfare. Satellites do not have to die to become useless. They can be blinded, they can be confused, they can be silenced. They can be made unreliable at the exact moment reliability matters most. And that matters because modern civilization has become dependent on machines most citizens never see. Satellites guide aircraft, synchronize banks, enable precision agriculture, support weather forecasting, connect remote forces, watch missile launches, carry communications, map disaster zones, and feed the intelligence machinery of modern states. They sit above the earth with the serenity of cathedral bells, then spend their lives doing the least romantic tasks imaginable: timing, routing, sensing, relaying, measuring. The majesty is real, so is the spreadsheet. In military terms, space is the nervous system of modern power. The United States fights through space. China understands this. Russia understands this. Every serious military planner understands this. A force that can see farther, communicate faster, navigate better, and strike with greater precision has an enormous advantage. A force that loses those advantages begins sliding backward into friction, confusion, and guesswork. War has always produced fog. Satellites were supposed to thin it. Anti-satellite weapons are designed to bring it back. The bottom line is simple. Anti-satellite warfare is not one weapon. It is a family of methods used to break, blind, disrupt, deceive, or threaten space systems. Some are destructive. Some are reversible. Some are obvious. Some are deniable. Some create debris. Some create confusion. The most dangerous ones may never leave a visible mark. That is why this episode matters. We are going to walk through the arsenal: direct ascent missiles, co-orbital systems, electronic warfare, directed energy, cyber attack. We will look at what they do, why they matter, how they change deterrence, and why the first moves in a future space conflict may look less like a battle and more like a string of technical anomalies. A satellite war does not need a loud opening shot. It may begin with a jammed signal over the Baltic, a spoofed GPS track near Taiwan, a laser pointed at an imaging satellite, a mysterious spacecraft drifting too close to a billion-dollar asset, or a ground station logging the wrong kind of access at the wrong hour. The age of anti-satellite weapons has already begun. The question is whether we recognize the opening move before the board goes dark. Before we talk about killing satellites, we need to understand what a satellite is. A satellite is not a magic eye in the sky. It is a machine in motion. It has power systems, radios, sensors, processors, software, propulsion, attitude control, thermal regulation, and links to ground infrastructure. It is part spacecraft, part radio tower, part camera, part clock, part router, and part industrial control system, wrapped in insulation and sent into a place where repairmen are famously hard to schedule. That matters because every part of that machine creates an attack surface. If the power system fails, the satellite dies. If the attitude control system fails, the satellite can lose pointing. If the thermal system fails, components can overheat or freeze. If the uplink is compromised, an attacker may send commands. If the downlink is jammed, the user may never receive the data. If the ground station is breached, the attacker may never need to touch the satellite at all. Space warfare sounds exotic until one notices how much of it still depends on antennas, authentication, software, timing, and operators sitting in buildings on Earth drinking coffee of uncertain moral character. A satellite is also predictable. That predictability is one of its strengths. It is why operators can plan communications windows, imaging passes, maneuvers, and conjunction assessments. Orbital mechanics allow us to know where a spacecraft will be, often with extraordinary precision, far into the future. Yet predictability is also a weakness. If a satellite follows a known path, then an adversary can study it. He can map when it passes overhead. He can estimate when it can see a region. He can plan when to jam it, when to dazzle it, when to maneuver near it, and when to attempt a physical intercept. The satellite may be fast, but it is rarely surprising. It is a sentry walking the same celestial hallway again and again, and the burglar has a wristwatch. That brings us to the first scientific rule of anti-satellite warfare. Orbit is not altitude alone. Orbit is energy, velocity, inclination, timing, and geometry. A satellite in low Earth orbit may be only a few hundred kilometers above the surface, but it is moving at roughly 7.8 kilometers per second. That is about 17,000 miles per hour. At that speed, a fleck of paint can become a bullet. A bolt can become a cannon shot. A collision between two objects in orbit is less like a fender bender and more like a mechanical disagreement conducted by thunder. This is why debris matters. When a direct descent anti-satellite missile destroys a spacecraft, it does not simply remove one object from orbit. It can create thousands of fragments, many too small to track reliably. Those fragments keep moving. They cross orbits. They threaten other satellites. They force operators to maneuver. They shorten mission lifetimes by consuming fuel. They raise insurance costs. They complicate launch planning. They turn one act of destruction into a long-term tax on everyone using that orbital region. Space does not forgive littering. It preserves evidence with the patience of a monk and the manners of a landmine. The second scientific rule is that satellites are service providers. People often speak as though the satellite itself is the thing being protected. That is partly true, especially when the satellite costs hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. Yet in military and economic terms, the real target is the service the satellite provides. A communications satellite provides connection. A positioning, navigation, and timing satellite provides location and time. An Earth observation satellite provides imagery or measurement. A missile warning satellite provides detection. A weather satellite provides environmental awareness. A signals intelligence satellite provides collection. An attack may strike the spacecraft, the signal, the data, the user terminal, the ground station, the operator network, the software supply chain, or the decision process that depends on the service. The satellite is the visible crown. The service is the kingdom. That is why anti-satellite warfare has so many forms. The simplest family to understand is the direct descent anti-satellite weapon. This is a missile launched from Earth to strike a satellite in orbit. It does not need an explosive warhead. At orbital velocities, impact itself provides enormous destructive force. The missile is fired upward, guided toward a predicted intercept point, and attempts to collide with the target. This is the version people understand because it resembles a traditional weapon. A launch occurs, a target is struck, a spacecraft breaks apart. Governments issue statements. Analysts count debris. Journalists discover the phrase orbital sustainability for 48 hours before returning to scandals with more flattering lighting. Direct descent weapons have advantages. They can be based on Earth. They can be tested visibly. They send political signals. They threaten satellites without requiring the attacking state to place another spacecraft nearby in advance. They also have serious drawbacks. They are escalatory. They are observable. They can create debris. They may reveal capabilities. They may harden an adversary's resolve rather than weaken it. And if used against the wrong target in the wrong orbit, they can damage the attacker's own future access to space. This is one of the stranger features of orbital warfare. A successful shot can still be strategically stupid. The second family is co-orbital weapons. A co-orbital system is placed into orbit and later maneuvers near another satellite. It may inspect, stalk, interfere with, grapple, push, jam, spray, blind, or collide with the target. In peacetime, the same basic technologies can be described as inspection, servicing, refueling, debris removal, or repair. In wartime, those same technologies can become weapons. This dual-use character is what makes co-orbital systems so strategically slippery. A spacecraft that can approach a satellite to repair it may also approach a satellite to disable it. A robotic arm used to capture debris may also be used to disturb another spacecraft. A close inspection satellite may be collecting intelligence, practicing rendezvous, or signaling that it can reach the target when ordered. Space diplomacy, at this point, begins to resemble a dinner party where every guest insists the knife is for butter. Co-orbital systems are powerful because they create uncertainty. If an unfamiliar satellite maneuvers near a military communications satellite, what is it doing? Is it inspecting? Is it rehearsing? Is it threatening? Is it malfunctioning? Is it trying to provoke a response? The target state may not know. Even if it does know, it may not be able to prove it publicly. That ambiguity is valuable. A direct descent missile announces itself through launch signatures and debris. A co-orbital system may loiter, shadow, drift, or approach over time. It can create pressure without firing a shot. It can hold a satellite at risk in a crisis. It can force the defender to expend attention, fuel, and planning capacity. Sometimes the purpose of a weapon is not to destroy a target. Sometimes it is to make the target's owner sleep badly. The third family is electronic warfare. This includes jamming and spoofing. Jamming means overwhelming or interfering with a signal so the receiver cannot use it properly. A jammer may target the uplink, the signal from Earth to the satellite, or the downlink, the signal from the satellite to Earth. It may also target user terminals, such as GPS receivers or satellite communications equipment. Spoofing is subtler. Instead of denying the signal, spoofing feeds the receiver false information. A ship may think it is somewhere it is not. A drone may navigate according to a lie. A precision weapon may receive corrupted positioning data. A unit may trust a timing source that has quietly wandered away from reality. Electronic warfare is attractive because it can be reversible. A state can turn a jammer on, then turn it off. It can deny involvement. It can claim interference, malfunction, or local technical problems. It can tailor the effect to a region. It can impose costs without creating debris. This makes jamming and spoofing likely tools in gray zone competition and early crisis escalation. They are also common because they attack dependence. The user does not need to destroy every satellite in a navigation constellation to cause trouble. He may only need to interfere with the local receivers that depend on that constellation. A cheap ground-based jammer near a battlefield can degrade a service provided by a multi-billion-dollar space architecture. This is the sort of exchange ratio that makes procurement officers stare out windows. The fourth family is directed energy. Directed energy systems include lasers and other methods designed to interfere with satellite sensors or components. In practical terms, the most discussed use is dazzling or blinding optical imaging satellites. Dazzling is temporary interference. A laser can saturate or confuse a sensor, preventing it from collecting useful imagery during a pass. Blinding is more severe. It can permanently damage a sensor. The distinction matters because dazzling may be treated as a lower-level, reversible action, while blinding begins to look more like a destructive attack. Directed energy has several attractions. It can act quickly. It can be difficult to attribute with public confidence. It can target sensors rather than the entire spacecraft. It can deny imagery at crucial moments without producing debris. It can also be geographically focused, aimed from a specific location when a satellite passes overhead. This is especially relevant for reconnaissance. An imaging satellite may have only a limited window over a target. If that window is denied, the defender may have protected a missile movement, a ship departure, a troop concentration, or construction activity. The satellite remains in orbit. The service fails at the moment of need. The absence of a picture becomes the event. The fifth family is cyber attack. Cyber is less dramatic than a missile, but it may be more consequential. A satellite system includes mission control networks, ground stations, software repositories, cloud services, identity systems, supply chains, user terminals, and contractor environments. Each of these can become a path into the mission. The spacecraft in orbit may be hardened, expensive, and difficult to reach, while the ground segment may depend on ordinary networks, ordinary credentials, ordinary patch cycles, and ordinary humans making ordinary errors with extraordinary consequences. The attacker may seek to steal data, corrupt data, deny service, interfere with command and control, pivot through the network, pre-position for wartime disruption, or seize control of part of the system. Cyber attack is dangerous because it can blur the line between espionage and warfare. If an adversary penetrates a satellite operator's network and quietly studies it, is that preparation, espionage, or an attack? If malware is placed but not triggered, has escalation occurred? If telemetry is corrupted during a crisis, can the victim prove intent before responding? War loves ambiguity because ambiguity buys time. Cyber provides plenty of it. Now we can put the pieces together into a counterspace kill chain. First, the attacker must identify the target. This means knowing which satellite provides which service, which ground stations support it, which frequencies it uses, which users depend on it, which orbit it occupies, and how it fits into the enemy's larger architecture. Space warfare begins with intelligence. Second, the attacker must track and characterize the target. He must understand its orbit, behavior, maneuver history, communications patterns, sensor windows, defenses, dependencies, and value. Some satellites are more important than they look. Some are decoys in bureaucratic clothing. Some are commercially owned, but militarily essential. In space, the sticker on the box rarely tells the whole story. Third, the attacker must choose the effect. Does he want to destroy the satellite, degrade it, blind it, jam it, spoof its users, threaten it, surveil it, hold it hostage, or quietly prepare access for later. The chosen effect depends on the political objective. A state that wants to send a warning may maneuver nearby. A state that wants to hide troop movement may dazzle an imaging satellite. A state that wants to disrupt a regional battle may jam SATCOM or GPS. A state that wants to cripple strategic warning may consider much more dangerous options. The weapon follows the purpose. The purpose follows the strategy. The strategy, one hopes, follows adult supervision. History does not always amaze us in this department. Fourth, the attacker must execute. Execution is harder than slogans imply. Direct ascent intercepts require precision tracking and timing. Co-orbital operations require maneuvering, fuel, guidance, proximity operations, and command discipline. Jamming requires the right frequencies, power, location, and timing. Cyber operations require access, persistence, knowledge of the target environment, and the ability to produce the desired effect without losing control of the operation. The popular phrase, shoot down a satellite, hides a mountain of engineering. That mountain is where many bad plans go to freeze. Fifth, the attacker must assess the effect. Did the satellite fail? Did the signal degrade? Did the operator switch to backup systems? Did the target maneuver? Did the attack reveal too much? Did the victim attribute the action? Did allies respond? Did debris threaten other assets? Did the political cost outweigh the military gain? This is why counterspace operations are not merely technical. They are strategic choices made inside a delicate escalation environment. A satellite may be physically remote, but an attack on it can have immediate consequences on Earth. A jammed signal can affect civil aviation. A cyber operation can spill into commercial networks. Debris can threaten neutral satellites. An attack on missile warning can look like preparation for a nuclear strike. That last point is essential. Satellites are not all equal. Some satellites provide commercial broadband. Some provide weather data. Some support financial timing. Some monitor crops. Some relay television. Some provide tactical communications. Some watch for missile launches. Some support nuclear command, control, and communications. Attacking a satellite is not a generic act. The meaning depends on the target, the timing, the method, and the crisis. Jamming a commercial communication service in a local war is serious. Blinding an imaging satellite during a border crisis is more dangerous. Attacking missile warning during a nuclear standoff is how civilization begins chewing the furniture. This is the foundation for deterrence in space. Deterrence depends on the ability to convince an adversary that the cost of attack will outweigh the gain. That sounds clean. Space makes it messy. Attribution may be difficult. Effects may be reversible. Commercial systems may be entangled with military users. Attacks may be deniable. Legal thresholds may be unclear. Escalation paths may be uncertain. And every major power now has strong incentives to hold adversary satellites at risk while protecting its own. That creates a tense world. Everyone wants space to remain usable, but everyone also wants the ability to deny space to an enemy in war. This is the usual human arrangement. We build a cathedral, then install arrow slits. There is one more scientific fact that shapes everything. Space systems are becoming more distributed. Old military space architectures often relied on a small number of large, exquisite satellites. Those satellites could be powerful, expensive, and difficult to replace. They were also tempting targets. The newer model is more proliferated. Many smaller satellites, commercial services, allied systems, hosted payloads, backup links, responsive launch, and terrestrial alternatives can make the architecture harder to cripple. The goal is resilience. Resilience does not mean invulnerability. It means the system can take a hit and keep functioning. A proliferated constellation may absorb losses better than a few large satellites. A military that can shift among commercial communications providers, allied systems, airborne relays, terrestrial backups, and autonomous operations is harder to paralyze. A command structure that can operate through degradation is harder to frighten. This is why anti-satellite warfare is driving a race between attack and resilience. The attacker wants cheap, deniable, precise ways to disrupt space services. The defender wants redundancy, maneuver, encryption, hardening, rapid replacement, better space domain awareness, and crews trained to fight through degraded conditions. The future of space warfare may be decided less by the single spectacular weapon than by which side can keep functioning when the elegant systems begin coughing smoke. So the ground truth is this: an anti-satellite weapon does not have to be a missile. A satellite does not have to explode to be defeated. An attack does not have to be visible to be real. Space warfare is a contest over services, signals, timing, trust, and decision-making. The spacecraft matter, the ground systems matter, the users matter, the data matters, the political context matters. The public will notice the explosion. Professionals will watch the interference. They will watch the strange maneuver. They will watch the degraded feed. They will watch the login from the wrong place. They will watch the timing drift. Because in the actual science of counterspace warfare, the first warning may be subtle. Now we move from the machinery to the map. Anti-satellite weapons are not floating abstractions. They belong to states. They belong to doctrines. They belong to fears, ambitions, budgets, bureaucracies, and war plans. A jammer is never merely a jammer. A co-orbital satellite is never merely a spacecraft with unusual manners. A missile aimed at orbit is a political sentence written in velocity. The chessboard has three major players at the center. China is the pacing challenge. Russia is the disruptive spoiler with deep experience and dangerous instincts. The United States is the most capable space power on Earth, and for that reason, the most dependent. Around them sit the secondary players, commercial firms, allied networks, rogue states, and rising powers that complicate every clean theory. Space strategy, like attic wiring in an old farmhouse, looks simple until someone opens the wall. Start with China. China's space program must be understood as part of a larger national strategy. Beijing does not treat space as a prestige theater alone. It treats space as a military enabler, an economic sector, a diplomatic instrument, and a domain where American advantage can be studied, matched, and eventually threatened. Chinese military thought pays close attention to systems. The People's Liberation Army does not need to defeat every American platform directly if it can degrade the network that allows those platforms to fight as one force. Aircraft carriers, stealth aircraft, long-range missiles, submarines, drones, and ground units all depend on information. They need sensing, they need navigation, they need targeting, they need timing, they need communications. Much of that passes through space. So China looks upward and sees the joints in the armor. The American military has spent decades building a style of war that assumes access to space. It assumes precision navigation. It assumes satellite communications. It assumes missile warning. It assumes overhead reconnaissance. It assumes weather data. It assumes blue force tracking. It assumes that the nervous system will hold. China has watched this with the patience of a clerk counting coins in a monastery cellar. For Beijing, counterspace capability is a way to make American power less graceful. Degrade the satellites, and the long-range kill chain becomes slower. Blind the sensors, and the carrier has less warning. Jam the communications, and the joint force becomes less joint. Spoof the navigation signal, and expensive weapons begin asking stupid questions. This matters most in the Western Pacific. A conflict over Taiwan would be a geography problem before it became anything else. Distance favors China. The United States would need to project power across the Pacific, coordinate allies, protect bases, keep ships moving, track missile launchers, maintain logistics, and preserve command and control across a vast theater. Space makes that possible. Counterspace weapons are designed to make it painful. China does not need to destroy every American satellite to gain an advantage. That is the first mistake in popular thinking. War is not a video game health bar. China may only need to degrade selected services in selected regions at selected times, long enough to complicate an American response. A jammed satellite communications link during an opening missile strike, a dazzled imaging satellite during a mobile launcher deployment, a spoofed navigation signal around a maritime choke point, a co-orbital system creating pressure near a key satellite before the crisis even begins, a cyber intrusion into a ground segment that produces confusion instead of fireworks. Each move can be limited. Each can be denied. Each can be timed. That is how gray zone counterspace warfare works. It does not always kick the door down. Sometimes it changes the locks and waits for the owner to notice. China's greatest advantage may be its understanding of American dependence. The United States has extraordinary military reach because it built an extraordinary information architecture. China is building tools to threaten that architecture. The aim is not to copy America plane for plane, ship for ship, or satellite for satellite. The aim is to contest the system that lets America fight at distance. That is the larger Chinese theory. To defeat the archer, darken the room. Now turn to Russia. Russia's space sector is weaker than it was during the Soviet era. Its economy is smaller. Its industrial base is strained. Its war in Ukraine has consumed men, equipment, money, and political attention. No serious analyst should mistake Russia for the Soviet Union wearing a new coat. Yet Russia remains dangerous in space. It inherited doctrine, engineering culture, launch infrastructure, military habit, and a long history of treating space as a domain of strategic competition. Russia may lack China's economic scale, but it retains a talent for disruption. It also retains a habit of using ambiguity as a weapon. If China is the patient systems challenger, Russia is the man in the corridor with a crowbar and a legal theory. Russia has already shown the world what destructive anti-satellite testing can do. In 2021, Russia destroyed one of its own defunct satellites in low Earth orbit. The test produced a debris field and forced astronauts aboard the International Space Station to take shelter. That was the essence of Russian signaling: militarily legible, diplomatically reckless, and annoying to everyone who enjoys breathing indoors. The test demonstrated capability. It also demonstrated temperament. Russia has also shown a strong interest in co-orbital behavior. Western officials have repeatedly raised concerns about Russian satellites that maneuver in suspicious ways near other spacecraft. These systems are often described through the language of inspection or experimentation, but the strategic effect is plain enough. A satellite that can approach may also threaten. A satellite that can inspect may also stalk. A satellite that can release a sub-satellite may also complicate the defender's understanding of what is happening. This is where Russia is especially troublesome. Its behavior can create uncertainty before a crisis, during a crisis, and after a crisis. It can force the United States to track, interpret, brief, warn, and respond. It can make space operators spend fuel, attention, and sleep. A good spoiler understands that exhaustion is also a weapon. Russia's most relevant counterspace activity has been tied to the war in Ukraine. That conflict showed that space services matter in modern war at every level. Commercial satellite communications helped Ukrainian forces stay connected. Commercial imagery helped the world track military movements. Satellite navigation supported drones, artillery, logistics, and targeting. Electronic warfare became a daily feature of the battlefield. Russia responded with jamming, cyber activity, and attempts to degrade space-enabled services. That is the important lesson. Space warfare did not wait for a formal declaration. It entered through the side door, wearing the ordinary clothes of electronic warfare and cyber operations. This is what makes Russia useful as a warning. The first years of the Ukraine war showed how space systems can be pulled into a terrestrial conflict, even when the war is not formally a space war. Commercial services become military assets. Civilian networks become strategic infrastructure. Private firms become part of the conflict, whether they asked for the role or not. A satellite internet terminal becomes a battlefield tool. An imagery provider becomes a strategic witness. The distinction between civilian and military space begins to fray. Russia saw this and attacked the scenes. Future adversaries will do the same. Russia also raises the most alarming nuclear question in the space domain. Western officials have expressed concern about Russian interest in a nuclear anti-satellite capability. The exact details remain contested in public reporting, and responsible analysis should avoid turning every rumor into a trumpet blast. Still, the strategic meaning is serious. A nuclear device used against satellites could produce massive electromagnetic effects and broad damage across orbital systems. That sort of weapon would be less like shooting a soldier and more like poisoning a well. A nuclear counterspace capability would threaten many satellites at once. It could affect military, commercial, allied, neutral, and even the attacker's own interests. It would also violate the basic logic that has kept space usable through decades of rivalry. States have competed in space. They have tested weapons. They have spied, jammed, maneuvered, and threatened. Yet there has remained a broad interest in preserving the orbital environment. A nuclear anti-satellite weapon would spit on that restraint. That is Russia's role on the chessboard. It may not be the strongest player over the long term. It may not have China's industrial depth. It may not have America's commercial space engine. But Russia has enough capability, enough doctrine, and enough appetite for risk to make it dangerous. It can threaten. It can interfere. It can jam. It can test boundaries. It can create crises whose costs fall on everyone else. In space, Russia is the neighbor who owns fireworks, gasoline, and a grievance journal. Now we come to the United States. The United States is the central actor because it built the most powerful military space architecture in history. American forces depend on satellites for warning, command control, communications, intelligence, navigation, targeting, weather, and timing. Space gives the United States global reach. It allows a commander in one theater to see, speak, move, and strike across distances that would have amazed earlier empires. This is American greatness in its technical form. It is also American vulnerability. For decades, the United States enjoyed an extraordinary position. It could use space while assuming that adversaries had limited ability to contest it. That era is gone. The old sanctuary model has collapsed. Space is now a contested domain, which means American military planning must treat satellite degradation as a real condition of war. The U.S. problem is brutally simple. The more effective space makes American forces, the more incentive adversaries have to attack space systems. This creates a strategic paradox. America must continue to use space because space is the foundation of its way of war. Yet America must learn to fight when space is degraded, because adversaries will try to break that foundation. The answer is resilience. More satellites, smaller satellites, distributed constellations, allied contributions, commercial partnerships, protected communications, rapid reconstitution, better cyber defense, better space domain awareness, and military units trained to operate through degraded signals. Resilience is not glamorous. It is the art of keeping the machine alive after the first elegant plan gets mugged in the parking lot. The United States has already begun shifting toward more distributed architectures. Large, exquisite satellites still matter, especially for strategic missions. They are not going away. But proliferated low Earth orbit constellations are becoming more important. The more nodes in the system, the harder it is to paralyze the whole architecture with a small number of attacks. This does not make the system invulnerable. It changes the attacker's math. Instead of targeting a handful of crown jewels, the adversary must deal with a larger, messier, more redundant system. That is the point. A resilient architecture does not promise perfect protection. It promises that the system can be wounded without collapsing. The American commercial sector is the wild card. SpaceX changed the strategic picture through reusable launch, high launch cadence, and Starlink. Commercial imagery firms changed the intelligence picture by making overhead observation faster, cheaper, and more widely available. Cloud providers, data analytics companies, ground station firms, and satellite manufacturers are now part of the space security structure. This is powerful. It is also awkward. Private firms do not fit neatly into older models of war. A commercial satellite may serve civilian customers, military users, allied governments, humanitarian groups, and journalists at the same time. If an adversary attacks that system, is it attacking a company, a military service, a country, or a coalition? If a company provides services to one side in a war, does the adversary treat it as a lawful target? If the company has customers across many nations, who bears the risk? The law has not caught up with the hardware. As usual, the hardware did not ask permission. Commercial space gives the United States enormous strategic depth. It provides capacity that government systems alone cannot match. It gives commanders more options. It gives allies access to services. It can be refreshed faster than older government programs. It also complicates enemy targeting because attacks on commercial systems may carry diplomatic and economic costs. Yet, commercial dependence creates exposure. Companies must defend cyber networks. They must manage supply chains. They must harden ground systems. They must make decisions under political pressure. They must decide where service is provided, where it is denied, and how much risk they are willing to accept during conflict. A CEO may become a geopolitical actor because a satellite network can change battlefield conditions. That sentence would have sounded deranged in 1985. Now it is procurement reality with a press office. Allies matter as well. The United States does not operate alone. NATO members, Japan, Australia, South Korea, France, the United Kingdom, Canada, and other partners bring space capabilities, ground infrastructure, geography, intelligence sharing, launch options, and diplomatic weight. Allied architectures can complicate enemy planning by spreading capability across more systems and jurisdictions. A coalition space architecture is harder to threaten cleanly. If an adversary attacks one satellite, it may trigger wider political consequences. If it jams one region, another partner may provide backup. If one network degrades, another may carry part of the burden. This is the strategic value of alliances in space. They turn a single target set into a varied, politically sensitive web. But alliances also create friction. Partners have different threat perceptions, legal standards, budgets, levels of technical maturity, and willingness to accept risk. Some may fear escalation. Some may rely heavily on commercial providers. Some may have domestic laws that slow response. Some may prefer public condemnation, while others prefer quiet retaliation. An allied space strategy is necessary, but it is not simple. Coalitions are like pipe organs, majestic when tuned, horrifying when every nation insists on playing its own hymn. Now look at the secondary powers. India matters because it has demonstrated direct ascent anti-satellite capability. Its 2019 test showed that New Delhi would not remain outside the counterspace club. India's strategic problem is shaped by China and Pakistan, but its space ambitions reach beyond regional rivalry. It wants prestige, autonomy, military capability, and a seat at the table when norms are written. India's rise complicates the chessboard because it is neither an American dependency nor a Chinese client. It is a major power with its own interests. Iran and North Korea matter in a different way. They are less capable space powers, but they understand the value of asymmetric disruption. They may not need sophisticated co-orbital weapons to threaten space services. Jamming, cyber activity, and attacks on ground infrastructure may offer cheaper ways to impose cost. For weaker states, the ground segment is especially tempting. Why chase a satellite moving at 17,000 miles per hour when a poorly defended network on Earth will sit still and make bad choices? Europe and Japan matter as defenders, partners, and norm builders. France has become more explicit about space defense. Japan is increasing its interest in space security because regional threats make the issue impossible to ignore. European states bring technical capability, regulatory influence, and diplomatic habit. They may not always move quickly, but they shape the language of legitimacy. In space politics, legitimacy matters because many counterspace activities occur below the threshold of open war. The side that can define responsible behavior has an advantage. The side that violates it too openly pays a diplomatic price. That brings us to the central strategic pattern. Every major actor wants the benefits of space. Every major actor fears dependence. Every major actor wants rules that protect its own systems. Every major actor wants options to threaten enemy systems. That is the contradiction at the heart of the chessboard. Space is shared, but power is not. Orbit is physically common, but politically contested. Satellites serve civilization, but they also serve armies. The same signal that guides a rescue helicopter can guide a missile. The same image that helps farmers can reveal a military convoy. The same commercial internet link that connects a village can connect a fighting unit. Dual use is not a footnote. It is the operating condition. This is why deterrence in space is so hard. In nuclear deterrence, the central fear was clear enough. Strategic attack could trigger catastrophic retaliation. In space, the latter is foggier. What counts as an armed attack? Is jamming enough? Is spoofing enough? Is a cyber intrusion enough? Is close approach enough? Does temporary dazzling justify retaliation? Does an attack on a commercial satellite count if it supports military users? The answers are not always clear. Adversaries know this. Ambiguity becomes maneuver space. A state may probe below the threshold. It may jam for a few hours. It may conduct a close approach and claim innocence. It may dazzle a satellite during a sensitive window. It may compromise a contractor. It may interfere with commercial service in a war zone. Each act can be calibrated to avoid a decisive response while still weakening the opponent. This is the gray zone in orbit. It is not peace. It is not open war. It is the uncomfortable middle where modern competition likes to breed. So the chessboard looks like this. China is building the ability to contest American space-enabled warfare, especially in the Indo-Pacific. Russia is using disruption, ambiguity, and risk tolerance to remain dangerous despite broader weakness. The United States is trying to preserve the advantages of space while hardening itself against the loss of those advantages. Commercial firms are becoming strategic actors because their networks now carry military weight. Allies are becoming nodes in the architecture. Secondary powers are learning that they do not need exquisite space weapons to threaten space services. The first great lesson is that anti-satellite warfare is not a separate conflict waiting politely above the atmosphere. It is woven into terrestrial war. A Taiwan crisis would be a space crisis. A NATO-Russia confrontation would be a space crisis. A Middle East missile war could become a space services crisis. A cyber campaign against a satellite operator could shape events on Earth before anyone in the public knew the name of the spacecraft involved. Space is no longer a distant theater. It is the overhead layer of earthly power. The second lesson is that the side with the most satellites does not automatically win. The side that wins is the side that can use space under pressure, degrade the enemy's use of space, absorb losses, shift to backups, and keep commanders from drowning in uncertainty. That means doctrine matters, training matters, cyber hygiene matters, allied coordination matters, commercial contracting matters, launch capacity matters, fuel margins matter, spectrum management matters. The board is wider than the satellite catalog. The third lesson is that restraint must be backed by capability. Diplomacy can reduce risk. Norms can shape behavior. Treaties can set expectations. Public attribution can impose costs. These tools matter. But restraint without resilience invites pressure. A state that cannot defend its space services will be tempted to plead for rules after the other side has already learned how to break them. In space, peace is helped by law. It is preserved by the knowledge that attacks may fail, may backfire, and may bring consequences. That is where the chessboard stands. China studies the American kill chain. Russia tests the boundaries of danger. America hardens a system it cannot afford to lose. Companies become strategic actors. Allies become nodes in the architecture. Smaller powers search for cheap ways to make expensive systems stumble. Above all of them, satellites keep moving through their orbits with mathematical calm, carrying signals that make modern life work. The board is not dark yet, but every serious player is learning how to reach for the lights. Now we pull the thread. Anti-satellite warfare begins in orbit, but it does not stay there. That is the great mistake in civilian thinking. People look up, see a satellite as something distant, metallic, and remote, then assume the consequences of attacking it remain distant as well. They do not. A disruption in space becomes a disruption in services. A disruption in services becomes a disruption in systems. A disruption in systems becomes a disruption in ordinary life. This is the central cascading effect of anti-satellite warfare. The target may be a spacecraft, but the victim is often a supply chain, a banking network, an aircraft route, a battlefield commander, a port, a farm, a weather model, or a family trying to make a phone call during a disaster. Space is far away. Space services are already in your pocket. That is the trick. Start with navigation and timing. Most people think of GPS as a blue dot on a phone. That is the consumer version, and even that is useful enough to make entire generations suspicious of paper maps. But the deeper value of GPS is timing. Precise time signals help synchronize telecommunications, banking transactions, power grids, transportation networks, data centers, military operations, and financial markets. If positioning is corrupted, vehicles go astray. If timing is corrupted, systems begin to disagree about reality. That disagreement can be subtle at first. A transaction logs at the wrong moment. A network packet arrives out of sequence. A ship reports a position that conflicts with another system. A drone navigates according to coordinates that feel correct until they are not. A military unit fires from a map that has quietly become fiction. The frightening part is not always the failure itself, it is the uncertainty. A clean failure can be diagnosed. A lying system must first be doubted. That takes time, and in war, time is the one luxury no commander can requisition through normal channels. Now consider satellite communications. Modern forces depend on communications that cross mountains, oceans, deserts, and denied terrain. Satellite communications allow ships to coordinate with aircraft, remote units to reach headquarters, drones to pass data, special operations teams to remain connected, and commanders to manage forces across great distance. Jam those links, and the force does not instantly collapse. It becomes slower. It becomes more cautious. It burns more time confirming orders, checking positions, rerouting information, and deciding whether a silence is technical or tactical. That distinction matters. A unit that loses communications may still fight, but it may fight with less coordination. A commander who loses a feed may still command, but with less confidence. A logistics officer who loses visibility may still move supplies, but with greater waste and delay. Anti-satellite warfare often works by adding friction. War is already friction wearing a helmet. Counterspace operations hand it a clipboard and promote it. The same pattern applies to intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Earth observation satellites provide imagery, radar data, infrared sensing, maritime tracking, environmental monitoring, and broad area awareness. They help identify troop movements, missile deployments, ship positions, damaged infrastructure, refugee flows, wildfires, floods, and industrial activity. When these systems are degraded, the effect is not only military. The picture of the world becomes poorer. A dazzled imaging satellite may miss a missile launcher moving under cloud breaks. A jammed data link may delay imagery from a crisis zone. A cyber-compromised ground system may corrupt the chain of custody for intelligence. A destroyed satellite may reduce revisit rates over a battlefield. One missing image rarely decides a war. A repeated pattern of missed images can change the tempo of decision-making. It can let an adversary move at the edge of visibility. It can turn certainty into suspicion. In modern war, suspicion is expensive. When commanders lack confidence, they hedge. They delay. They over-allocate forces. They fire at less ideal times. They send aircraft to verify what satellites should have seen. They move ships more cautiously. They hold reserves too long or commit them too early. A degraded space picture becomes a degraded operational rhythm. That rhythm can decide whether a defense holds, whether a strike lands, or whether a convoy survives the night. Civilian life is exposed as well. Weather forecasting depends heavily on satellites. If weather satellites are degraded, forecasting gets worse. Aviation planning becomes harder. Maritime operations become riskier. Farmers lose precision in planning irrigation, harvest, and crop protection. Disaster response agencies lose part of their early warning picture. A hurricane does not care that the satellite was a military target by association. A wildfire does not wait for a diplomatic protest. A flood does not pause while lawyers debate proportionality. This is where anti-satellite warfare becomes morally ugly. Space systems are dual use. The same infrastructure can support civilian life and military operations. A satellite constellation may serve emergency responders, farmers, banks, airlines, shipping firms, journalists, soldiers, and intelligence analysts at the same time. Strike the military value, and civilian value bleeds with it. That is not an accident in many cases. It is part of the leverage. A state may avoid direct civilian targeting while still imposing civilian costs through attacks on shared infrastructure. The result is a cleaner legal argument and a dirtier practical outcome. There is a certain genius in that, if one has the soul of a broken vending machine. Commercial companies sit in the middle of this problem. A satellite operator may begin a war as a business and wake up as a strategic actor. Its network may carry military traffic. Its imagery may expose war crimes. Its terminals may keep a government online. Its ground stations may become targets. Its executives may face pressure from states, customers, regulators, insurers, and the public. This changes the political character of war. A private firm can now alter the battlefield. A commercial service can become a national security asset. A corporate decision can shape escalation. That means anti-satellite warfare also attacks confidence in markets. If satellites become regular targets, insurers raise premiums. Investors reprice risk. Launch customers become more cautious. Operators spend more on maneuverability, hardening, redundancy, and cyber defense. Smaller firms struggle to absorb the cost. New entrants face higher barriers. The space economy does not stop. It gets heavier. Every mission carries more risk. Every business case must carry more protection. Every operator begins to budget for a more hostile sky. Debris makes this worse. A debris-generating attack is not a local event. Fragments spread through orbital regimes. They can remain dangerous for years. They create collision risk for unrelated satellites. They force avoidance maneuvers. They consume propellant. They shorten satellite lifetimes. They complicate constellation management. One state may destroy one satellite for one military reason. Everyone else inherits part of the mess. Orbital debris is strategic pollution. It is the smoke that never rises and the shrapnel that keeps attending meetings. The insurance effects are especially important. Insurance is one of those boring subjects that quietly decides whether grand ambitions become real hardware. If orbital risk rises, insurance costs rise. If insurance costs rise, mission costs rise. If mission costs rise, fewer companies can compete. If fewer companies compete, the market consolidates around large firms and state-backed actors. That has strategic consequences. A dangerous orbital environment favors the wealthy, the subsidized, and the entrenched. Smaller firms, universities, poorer states, and scientific missions face the squeeze first. Space becomes less open. The frontier grows a toll booth. The military consequences also compound. If satellites are attacked, militaries must shift to backup methods, terrestrial communications, airborne relays, inertial navigation, fiber links, high-altitude platforms, pre-planned routes, old-fashioned radio discipline, human judgment, dead reckoning, paper procedures that suddenly look less quaint and more like a civilization insurance policy. This is not regression. It is resilience. A serious military must be able to fight with exquisite systems and without them. If it can operate only when the screens are perfect, it has built a palace on wet cardboard. The states that handle cascading effects best will be the states that train under degradation before the crisis. They will practice with jammed communications. They will rehearse GPS denial. They will run exercises with degraded imagery. They will force commanders to make decisions with missing data. They will build muscle memory for confusion. That kind of training is uncomfortable because it reveals dependence. Good. Dependence should be revealed before an enemy reveals it for you. There is also an escalation cascade. A temporary jammer may seem limited. The victim may see it as preparation for attack. A close approach may be described as inspection. The target state may see it as positioning for sabotage. A cyber intrusion may be espionage. It may also look like pre-placement for wartime disruption. Each side reads the other through fear. In space, where attribution can be murky and warning times can be short, fear becomes an accelerant. This is especially dangerous around strategic systems. If missile warning satellites are threatened, the stakes rise sharply. A state may interpret interference with early warning systems as preparation for nuclear attack. Even temporary degradation can be terrifying in the wrong crisis. The difference between reversible and irreversible may matter less than the fear created at the moment. This is where anti-satellite warfare touches the oldest nightmare of the nuclear age. Blind the wrong sensor at the wrong time, and leaders may assume the worst. The final cascading effect is political. Public trust depends on invisible systems working. When navigation fails, people blame incompetence. When communications drop, they blame providers. When markets stutter, they blame banks. When disaster warnings worsen, they blame agencies. The public rarely sees the orbital cause. That gives attackers room to operate. A counterspace attack can create domestic pressure without public clarity. It can make a government look weak, confused, or dishonest. It can produce argument before attribution. It can turn technical disruption into political embarrassment. In an age already rich in lunatic pamphlets with broadband access, that matters. So the cascading effects follow a pattern. A satellite is jammed, a service degrades, a commander slows, a market reprices, a ship reroutes, a farmer loses data, an insurer raises premiums, a company hardens its network, a state accuses, an adversary denies. The public argues, the debris keeps moving. That is the real danger of anti-satellite warfare. It does not remain clean. It does not remain military. It does not remain technical. It spills downward into ordinary systems. The violence begins above the atmosphere. The bill arrives on Earth. Now we look ahead. Anti-satellite warfare is no longer a hypothetical category tucked away in strategic studies seminars and defense contractor slide decks. It is moving into the operational world. The tools exist. The incentives exist. The targets exist. The dependence exists. The only real question is how far states are willing to go when crisis arrives. Over the next 1 to 5 years, the most likely counterspace activity will not be the spectacular destruction of satellites. It will be pressure, jamming, spoofing, dazzling, cyber intrusions, suspicious proximity operations, legal arguments, commercial coercion, insurance shocks, diplomatic accusations, quiet tests wrapped in peaceful language. It will look less like a clean opening battle and more like a long series of small cuts, each one shallow enough to deny, each one deep enough to matter. That is how modern rivalry prefers to move, with gloves on the hands and a knife in the sleeve. The first indicator to watch is electronic warfare around conflict zones. GPS jamming and spoofing will continue to expand near borders, seas, ports, drone corridors, and air defense regions. The Baltic, the Black Sea, the Eastern Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, the South China Sea, and the Western Pacific are the obvious regions to watch. When satellite navigation becomes unreliable near a flashpoint, it is rarely a random technical quirk. It is usually the sound of a state rehearsing control over confusion. The warning sign is not one incident. The warning sign is pattern. Repeated spoofing near naval routes. Jamming that coincides with exercises. Navigation anomalies during missile deployments. Interference around drone activity. Commercial aircraft reporting unreliable positioning near sensitive airspace. Ships appearing in impossible locations on tracking systems. One strange event is a curiosity. 10 strange events are a doctrine waving from behind the curtain. The second indicator is the growth of proximity operations. Watch for satellites that maneuver close to other satellites, especially in geostationary orbit and crowded low Earth orbit regimes. Watch for inspection satellites that approach military or dual-use systems. Watch for satellites that release smaller objects. Watch for maintenance or servicing programs that carry tools useful for interference. The vocabulary may sound peaceful: inspection, repair, refueling, debris removal, servicing. All of those can be real. All of those can also be rehearsals for coercion. Spacecraft with robotic arms are like diplomats with brass knuckles. The polite title does not cancel the physics. The third indicator is directed energy. Ground-based lasers designed to dazzle or blind optical satellites will become more important as imagery becomes more central to modern war. The more commercial Earth observation grows, the more adversaries will seek ways to deny collection at critical moments. A missile battery moving at night, a convoy hiding under weather breaks, a ship leaving port. a construction site changing shape before a crisis. All of these can create incentives to interfere with sensors overhead. The key question is whether directed energy remains temporary and deniable or becomes damaging and escalatory. Dazzling a sensor during a pass is one level. Permanently blinding it is another. Military planners will understand the difference. Politicians may pretend to misunderstand it when convenient. That is why analysts should watch the effect, not only the explanation. In national security, the official explanation often arrives wearing shoes that squeak. The fourth indicator is cyber prepositioning. This may be the most important one and the hardest to see. A satellite cyber campaign may begin months or years before a conflict. Attackers may probe ground stations, identity systems, contractors, software vendors, mission planning networks, cloud environments, telemetry pipelines, and user terminals. They may steal credentials. They may map networks. They may place implants. They may wait. The wartime effect could be sudden, but the access will likely be old. This is why cyber defense in space cannot be treated as an afterthought. If the satellite operator discovers the intrusion during the crisis, the defender is already late. The real battle is fought in boring places: privileged access management, logging, patching, segmentation, incident response, supply chain review, tabletop exercises, and operator discipline. The kingdom may be in orbit. The lock is often on a laptop. The fifth indicator is investment in proliferated constellations. The United States and its allies will keep moving toward distributed space architectures because the old model of a few exquisite satellites is too tempting a target set. Large strategic satellites will remain important. Missile warning, nuclear command and control, and specialized intelligence missions will still require high-end systems. But the future will lean heavily on numbers, redundancy, commercial capacity, rapid refresh, and the ability to absorb losses. This changes the strategic balance. If one satellite is irreplaceable, it becomes a hostage. If a constellation has hundreds of nodes, the attacker must work harder. If a satellite can be replaced quickly, the value of destroying it falls. If commercial and allied systems can carry part of the load, the enemy faces a wider target set. This is the logic of resilience. It is not glorious. It does not photograph well. It wins by refusing to die on schedule. The sixth indicator is responsive launch. If a state can replace lost satellites quickly, it changes the cost-benefit calculation for anti-satellite attack. Destroying a satellite matters less if the victim can launch a replacement within days or weeks. That does not erase the damage, but it reduces the strategic payoff. Responsive launch is therefore part of deterrence. It tells the attacker, you may break the window, but the house has a very determined carpenter. The seventh indicator is commercial hardening. Watch which firms are treated as national security infrastructure. Watch which companies receive government contracts for protected communications, military imagery, launch services, data analytics, and ground station support. Watch whether insurers demand better cyber controls. Watch whether governments create new requirements for satellite operators. Watch whether commercial firms begin disclosing hostile interference as a normal business risk. The commercial sector will become more militarized in function, even if it remains civilian in branding. That tension is not going away. Over the next 5 years, commercial satellite companies will be asked to do 3 difficult things at once: serve customers, support states, survive attack. Some will handle that transition well. Others will discover that national security work comes with national security enemies. The customer support department may not be emotionally prepared for strategic coercion, though to be fair, no one who has used a help desk ticketing system should be surprised by suffering. The eighth indicator is allied coordination. The United States cannot build space resilience alone. It will need partners for ground stations, launch access, sensor networks, intelligence sharing, space domain awareness, spectrum coordination, commercial contracting, and diplomatic response. The countries to watch include Japan, Australia, the United Kingdom, France, Canada, Germany, South Korea, and selected NATO partners. The strongest allied space posture will have shared warning, shared exercises, shared legal thresholds, shared commercial arrangements, and backup pathways for degraded services. The weak version will have speeches. Speeches are useful in the way umbrellas are useful indoors. They show intention. They do not stop the rain. The ninth indicator is norm setting. States will continue arguing over what counts as responsible behavior in space. Destructive, debris-generating tests will remain politically toxic. Close approaches will draw more attention. Cyber activity will remain difficult to expose. Electronic warfare will remain widespread because it is useful and deniable. Directed energy will sit in the gray zone where governments can do much while saying little. The diplomatic fight will center on thresholds. What is an attack? What is interference? What is irresponsible behavior? What is legitimate inspection? What is self-defense? What is a military target when a commercial satellite serves both soldiers and civilians? These questions sound legal, and they are. They are also operational. The answer determines when a commander can act, when a state can accuse, when an ally must respond, and when deterrence has failed. The 10th indicator is strategic messaging. Pay attention to official language. When governments start naming specific foreign satellites, warning against proximity operations, accusing states of jamming, or publicly attributing cyber activity against space systems, the political temperature is rising. Public attribution is rarely casual. It is usually a signal. It says, "We see you." It also says, "We may need others to see you too." The most dangerous scenarios over the next 5 years are not hard to identify. A Taiwan crisis in which China uses jamming, spoofing, dazzling, cyber, and proximity operations to slow American and Allied intervention. A NATO-Russia confrontation in which Russia interferes with commercial satellite communications and imagery providers supporting European defense. A Middle East conflict in which regional actors jam navigation and communications across maritime corridors. A cyber attack on a major commercial satellite operator that spills into civil services. A suspicious close approach in geostationary orbit that forces a crisis over intent. A destructive ASAT test or wartime intercept that creates debris and triggers a wider diplomatic crisis. The worst scenario remains interference with strategic warning. If missile warning satellites are threatened during a major crisis, escalation risk rises sharply. Leaders may fear that an adversary is preparing a larger attack. Even temporary interference can be misread. This is the nightmare zone of counterspace warfare, when a reversible action creates irreversible fear. In that environment, restraint becomes harder, decision time shrinks, assumptions harden, and history begins looking for a trapdoor. So what should serious states do? They should build redundancy before the crisis. They should train forces to operate through degraded space services. They should harden ground systems. They should secure commercial partners. They should practice rapid attribution. They should develop response options below and above the threshold of armed conflict. They should make clear that attacks on space systems can carry consequences. They should preserve channels for crisis communication, because the only thing worse than a dangerous move is a dangerous move nobody can explain in time. The key phrase is fight through. A state cannot assume perfect access to space. It must be able to fight through jamming, spoofing, cyber disruption, degraded imagery, delayed communications, and partial service loss. It must know which missions are truly dependent on space and which can shift to backups. It must rehearse the ugly version of war before the ugly version arrives. Military greatness in this environment will not consist of having the cleanest dashboard. It will consist of functioning after the dashboard lies. The broader lesson is civilizational. Modern society has built enormous power on invisible precision: time signals, positioning data, weather feeds, financial synchronization, communications links, remote sensing. These systems inspire wonder because they extend human reach across the planet and into the heavens. They also create dependence so quiet that most citizens never notice it. That silence is dangerous. A civilization should know which pillars hold up the roof. Anti-satellite warfare exposes the hidden architecture of modern life. It shows that space is not distant. It shows that commercial systems are strategic. It shows that law without capability is fragile. It shows that deterrence must account for ambiguity. It shows that the next conflict may begin with services degrading rather than weapons firing. Above all, it shows that orbit has become part of the battlefield because Earth has made itself dependent on the sky. Over the next 1 to 5 years, expect more interference, more probing, more proximity operations, more commercial entanglement, more public accusations, and more investment in resilience. Expect governments to speak the language of peace while preparing for denial. Expect companies to speak the language of service while hardening for attack. Expect militaries to rediscover old skills because new systems will fail at inconvenient times, as new systems have always enjoyed doing. The horizon is not hopeless. A resilient space order is possible. It will require better architecture, clearer norms, stronger alliances, hardened commercial systems, serious cyber discipline, and commanders trained to operate under uncertainty. That is difficult, but difficulty is not defeat. It is merely reality removing the decorative wrapping. Anti-satellite weapons are now part of the strategic environment. They will shape deterrence. They will shape war plans. They will shape insurance markets. They will shape commercial space. They will shape alliance politics. They will shape the way nations think about sovereignty, vulnerability, and power in the orbital age. The age of anti-satellite weapons has already begun. The opening moves will be quiet. The warnings will be technical. The consequences will be earthly. And the nations that endure will be the ones that can keep faith with their mission when the clock lies, the image fails, and the signal fades. This has been Orbital Estimate. End transmission.